I'm really happy with the match today. I really had to dig deep. I know that Laura is such a fighter, so I'm happy with.
She was about to serve. That's all. One serve in an ordinary match on an ordinary afternoon in Miami. But something was wrong, and everyone watching could feel it before they could explain it. A hesitation in the air, a pause that shouldn't have been there, a young woman turning toward an umpire's chair with a look that said she had reached the end of something. What happened in the next 90 seconds would not just decide a tennis match, it would rip open a secret that professional tennis had been quietly protecting for years. And by the time this story is over, you will understand why one 21-year-old's 4 whispered sentences did something that years of complaints, fines, and controversies never managed to do. They made the entire sport stop and listen. Let's go back to the beginning, because you need to understand exactly what she was walking into. Alex is 21, Filipina, rising fast. The kind of player commentators use words like electric for, the kind whose smile after a win feels genuine rather than rehearsed. Just 1 year earlier, in that same Miami stadium, she had done something that should have made headlines for a decade. She beat 3 Grand Slam champions back-to-back on her way to a stunning semifinal run, the kind of run careers are built on. She was, by every account, one of the most upbeat players on tour, cheerful, composed, not the type to make a scene. So when she snapped, and she did snap, quietly, precisely in front of a stadium and a broadcast camera, everyone should have known this wasn't nothing. Her opponent was Laura Siegemund, 38 years old, German, a veteran. And if you know tennis, you already feel the temperature drop slightly at that name, because Siegemund carries a reputation that precedes her onto every court she walks onto, a reputation that has nothing to do with her forehand. Here's where the first question drops, and I want you to sit with it. How does a professional athlete build a career-long reputation for something other than her tennis? What is she actually doing out there? The numbers came first. Mid-match, the broadcast put up a statistic that should have been a scandal all on its own. Alex had gone over the 25-second serve clock on 57% of her service points. Fatigue, nerves, the pressure of a marathon match. That's understandable. But Siegemund's number wasn't 57%. It was 85%, 85%. Read that again, because your brain wants to round it down. It's not a rounding error. It's not a rough patch in one set. It is a pattern so consistent, so deliberate, that math itself was accusing her before Alex ever opened her mouth. But numbers on a screen don't make headlines. People do. And at 6-7, 30-15 in the second set, with Alex mid-service motion, Siegemund turned, walked to the back of the court, stopped the point cold. It happened again and again. Small moments. Legal, technically, forgettable, individually. But stacking second by second into something that Alex could no longer swallow. She walked to the umpire's chair, and what she said next didn't sound like an outburst. It sounded worse than an outburst. It sounded like restraint finally cracking. Can you watch her time? Because many times she's delaying. The umpire's answer was the kind of answer that tells you everything about how long this has been allowed to happen. She's going to be spoken to, not penalized, not stopped, spoken to, as if a decades-long pattern could be solved with a stern word between points. Alex wasn't finished. I was about to serve, she said. Then again, she stopped the point. I was about to serve, and she turned around. 3 times. Not shouted, not dramatic, just repeated, like someone trying to make a fact land in a room that kept refusing to hear it. And here's your first real gut punch. Siegemund, overhearing all of it, didn't deny slowing the game down. She reframed it. It's not about the time, she said, it's about the focus. Not a denial, a justification. Which means the real question was never whether it was happening. Everyone already knew it was happening. The real question was why nobody had stopped it. You'd think this was the peak of the story. It wasn't even close. Because once you pull that thread, an entire hidden history unravels. And it turns out Alex wasn't the first player standing at that chair feeling this exact helplessness. She was just the latest. Rewind to 2023, the US Open, Coco Gauff, a name you know, across the net from Siegemund. In the third set, Gauff appears to hit a clean ace. Siegemund throws up her hand. Not ready. She claims Goff has to serve it again. The umpire eventually gives Siegemund a point penalty for repeated delays, but only after damage was already done. Goff's words afterward were almost eerily calm, almost identical in spirit to what Alex would say 2 years later. She was going over the time, and I never said anything. The crowd started to notice. Same player, same tactic, a different year, a different opponent, the same unresolved question hanging in the air like smoke that never clears. Now Wimbledon, 2025. Siegemund arrives 5 minutes late for her 4th round match against 21-year-old Solana Sierra, who is left standing on court, waiting, exposed, unsettled before the first ball is even struck. During the match itself, racket changes mid-game, stalled service motions, extended pauses that serve no purpose except to break rhythm. And then Melbourne, earlier in 2025, Siegemund facing the 5th seed, a 2024 finalist. At a critical moment, her opponent takes a second-time violation while serving, a penalty point that hands Siegemund the decisive break. A match, potentially a tournament run, altered by seconds on a clock that somehow only mattered when it was inconvenient for the other player. Feel that pattern tightening around you yet? Because it gets older. It goes back further than any of these matches. Naomi Osaka, one of the most dominant players of her generation, said this back in 2018, years before any of these incidents. She believed part of Siegemund's game was figuring out how to irritate her opponent. 2018. Let that sink in. This isn't a phase. This isn't a bad week. This is a strategy that has survived untouched for over half a decade across 3 different generations of rising stars, and nobody in power ever pulled the emergency brake. So now the question isn't about one match in Miami anymore. It's bigger and uglier. How does a system let the exact same complaint get made by 3 different players across 7 years and change nothing? Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Siegemund doesn't deny any of it. In a press conference, almost disarmingly calm, she admitted, "I know that I have some very controversial habits. I've been doing it all my life. I'm pretty consistent with my weirdness that I have." Consistent. She used that word herself. The player at the center of the controversy is openly telling you this isn't an accident, and still nothing changes. And it's not just her opponents who've noticed. Some of the biggest names in the men's game have been quietly furious about the same broken system for years, just aimed at different targets. Carlos Alcaraz has called it crazy, said it can feel unfair. Taylor Fritz has argued umpires need more common sense. Daniil Medvedev pointed fingers at inconsistent enforcement from specific officials, one in particular starting the clock too fast against him and nobody else, which means this was never really about one difficult player. It was about an entire rule book with no spine. A 25-second shot clock that exists on paper but bends depending on who's enforcing it, who's watching, and who's willing to complain. And Alcaraz said something that should chill anyone hoping for change. "I don't want to waste my time because I've already been through other situations where you complain and nothing changes. So here's your moment of dread." Alex had just done something brave, spoken up, on camera, in real time, against one of the game's most notorious veterans. But according to one of the sport's biggest stars, speaking up doesn't fix anything. It just gets filed away. Was Alex about to become one more name on a long list of ignored complaints? Here's where the story pivots, and pivots hard. Because this time, something was different. Not the rule, not the umpire. Alex herself. She won. 3 hours and 20 minutes. A brutal, grinding 6-7, 6-3, 6-3 battle that became the longest match of the tournament. She could have walked off that court, let the scoreboard speak for her, and said nothing more. Instead, in her press conference afterward, she chose her words with a precision that felt almost surgical. She refused to attack Siegemund by name. She refused to play the victim. What she said instead was somehow more devastating than an insult could ever be. There's a lot of things in tennis that players do to try to get an edge, and that's just the reality. Is it fair? I don't know. Is it against the rules? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It's up to the umpires to regulate. Read that last line again. It's up to the umpires to regulate. She didn't just win a match. She handed the sport a mirror and asked it to look at itself. And the tennis world did something it rarely does. It agreed with her instantly and almost unanimously. immediately. The clip of her at the umpire's chair spread everywhere within hours. Fans who had watched Siegemund get away with this for years finally saw someone say it out loud, on camera, undeniably. But the moment that should hit you hardest wasn't a fan reaction. It was Coco Gauff's, the same player who had quietly swallowed this exact frustration 2 years earlier, who had once said nothing while a crowd noticed for her. She was asked about Alex's outburst in her own press conference, and her answer wasn't jealousy, wasn't rivalry, wasn't indifference. It was recognition. I think Alex handled it really well, Gauff said. She didn't lose her composure. She just stated the facts and let the umpire do his job. That's exactly how you're supposed to handle it. One young player watching another young player do the thing she wished she'd been able to do herself years earlier when nobody was ready to listen yet. That's the twist underneath the twist. This was never really just about Alex Eala versus Laura Siegemund. It was about every player who had swallowed this exact same injustice before her. Gauff in 2023, Sierra at Wimbledon, an unnamed finalist in Melbourne, Osaka's warning all the way back in 2018. All of them quietly building toward this one moment where someone finally refused to let it slide. And here's the part that should genuinely stay with you after this video ends. Alex never once demanded Siegemund be punished. She never called her a cheat. She never made it personal. All she asked, in the calmest possible words, was for someone, anyone, to actually watch the clock. That's it. That was the entire ask. And the fact that such a small, reasonable request became a viral moment tells you everything about how low the bar had fallen. So think back to that opening image. A 21-year-old walking toward an umpire's chair, mid-match, mid-serve, jaw tight, words measured. You didn't know yet why it mattered. Now you do. It wasn't a meltdown. It was the sound of a pattern finally breaking. 7 years and 3 players in the making, cracking open in front of a stadium that didn't even realize what it was witnessing until it was over. Because the real question was never about one shot clock, one umpire, or one match in Miami. It was about how many players have to whisper the exact same 4 words. I was about to serve, before a sport finally decides to listen. And as Alex heads into the next stretch of her season, into bigger stages and bigger stakes, that question isn't closed. It's just waiting for whoever